Hey, Patrol members, welcome back to another episode of the Mojave Patrol. I'm glad you could join me. Here, let me adjust this for you a little bit. How's that? Is that a little better? You can't see my shirt, really. It says, I'll be in the backyard. It's got a glass of whiskey and a cigar. And, you know, I've been joking about this for years and years and years. And I think it's about time to tell you the story of why I like to mix beer and ice. I know every time I go someplace and order a beer, I said bring a glass of ice, and they give me a weird look. And unfortunately, they give me a weird look. What can you do? So tonight for a cigar, we have a Cuban Delight. Right here, Cuban Delight. Cuban Delight. Made in the Republic of Cuba. Well, it says that, doesn't mean it is. And I'm going to trim that with my new to me K-Bar wrench knife. Look at that. It's got a crescent wrench back end and a knife blade at one end. Ooh. Oh, pardon me. Oh. Ooh, I can't remember the last time I had chicken marsala. Anyway. Oh, if you collect vintage tools and they're black oxide like this is not vintage, of course. You want to look for a WF on the tool someplace. That means war finish. During the Second World War, when tools were made, chrome was at a premium. So you couldn't get chrome tools. They were black oxide, and they were stamped WF for war finish. Believe it or not, collectors like those. So I'm going to trim the cap of my Cuban Delight with my new knife. It's trimming nicely. Look at that. That cap came right off. Got a nice draw. And we'll put this back in its sheath. And we are going to light our cigar with a new to me Bowers lighter, made in Kalamazoo, Michigan. It's really used. It's really beat up. Somebody used the crap out of this lighter, and it says compliments of the King Cigar Company. Lit that cigar really well. So ice and beer. Decades ago, when some buddies of mine and I were out in the desert. God, it's got to be over 30 years ago now. Maybe longer. Anyway, we were trying to find this place on a topographical map called the Black Metal Mine. Well, my buddy Ray had just purchased a 4Runner, Toyota 4Runner, which the early 4Runners were basically pickup trucks with a shell on the back that was all encompassed in one unit. Not like the modern 4Runner. You could take the shell off the back of the 4Runner in those days. And he was loving the hell out of that thing. So we said, hey, let's go up to the black metal mine. So we had known it was there. We had known it was there for quite a while. But nobody at that time, nobody I knew at that time had a 4x except Ray. Well, I, of course, went to the desert and buy off-roading vehicle, a 1964 Ford Falcon two-door. And we brought with us his future brother-in-law. I'll remember his name here in a bit. And I really feel bad because I don't remember his name, because we were actually pretty good friends. He was a good guy, really good guy. At least I thought so. A little unreliable, but he was a lot younger than we were. He was a teenager, and we were old men in our late 20s. You know, old men, way of the world. And my buddy Ray had just become a police officer. So anyhow, we looked at this topographical map, and of course there's a dotted line that leads right in front of the mine, which said 4-wheel drive only. But I thought to myself, you know what, this car is pretty light and it's done really well so far on these dirt desert roads. We shouldn't have a problem. And my buddy Ray's like, oh, don't worry, man, I got a strap. We can tow you if we need to, right? Oh, no problem. No problem. So off we go. We get up in the morning, off we go. And thus began like a 14-hour ordeal. So the road leading to the canyon the mine was in was pretty good. You could clip along that at a good 25, 30 miles an hour. You know, there was a little washboard, there was a little sand, but as a whole, the road was in pretty good shape. As a matter of fact, it still is to this day. So you would drive up this road and would make a sweeping left turn, head north, and then you would dip down into the canyon, and the road continued across to the other side of the canyon and out again to a canyon farther beyond. But we needed to turn right and go up the canyon. Huh. Well, on paper, it looks simple. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Let's get this started. You know, it's 92 degrees in the bunker here, in the compound, in the headquarters. Where we go? Guinness, warm Guinness. We're going to sit and let that cool a bit. Where was I? Oh, easy peasy lemon squeezy. So Ray takes off ahead of us in his pickup. Now I want to illustrate this with pictures, none of which were pictures taken at the actual time, because digital cameras didn't exist, at least not in the sense that you could carry them around with you. And we didn't bring regular cameras and just take pictures willy-nilly all the time like people do today, right? There was a couple of saving graces here. Ray had one of those early cell phones, one of those big black flip phones, you know. Anyhow, we're going up the canyon, we're going up the canyon, we're going up the canyon, and the car is bogging in the sand. But I'm getting through the sand, and it's like, and it's jumping and jumping and jumping, but I'm getting there. Okay? And Ray is gone. He's up ahead of us. He's up there. So I get stuck. Really stuck. So Brian is the guy's name. Brian and I got out of the car, and of course, you know, I'm not a total fool, even in those days. So I had shovels and you know, things like that. So we dig out. This is before I realized you could air down the tires and get a broader footprint and more traction. I didn't realize that then. But anyway, we were digging in front of the tires, and we go and dig in front of the tires and go and dig in front of the tires. So we got stuck again. We dug. I threw it in the first gear. I let out the clutch, and I gave it gas, and all of a sudden there was a loud bang, and the motor started making all these crazy noises, and the car was shaking, and I shut it off. So Brian's like, "What the F was that?" And I said, "I don't know, dude. It sounded bad." So the Falcon had a little 6-cylinder in it. So much to surprise, I opened my hood, and the engine is sitting there at a 45-degree angle. Because the motor mounts broke, and the engine shifted, it fell over. Why it didn't rip the hoses off the radiator, I don't know. They were in there in these weird angles. They were all tight. So I'm like, holy blank. And of course, Brian comes over and looks at it, and his eyes bug out. And he says, "Holy shit, we're stuck here." And Ray is way up the canyon. I said, "Look, dude, you wait right here with the car." Because we had all our crap in it. We had firearms in it. We had all our food, all our camping gear, the water, everything was in that car. And you know what? By this time, I had gone through enough of the desert to see like what happens to abandoned cars. Man, they're shot full of holes. All the stuff is stolen out of them. Not that that was going to happen here. This is pretty remote, right? Anyhow, somewhere in one of my playlists, there's a video. What I'll do is I'll put a card up here for it. About 2 years ago or so, when we were up at the Black Metal Mine, I found someone had left an old video camera inside the mine, and I managed to get images off of it and put it on the and make a video about it. Anyway, so Brian sits down next to the car, and I take off across the desert sand. Now, according to the topo map, the Black Metal Mine was only about, it was less, the turnoff for the mine was less than a mile up, and then it was like several hundred yards up to the mine from that point. So, I take off towards the mine. I walk about 15 minutes, and here comes Ray and his pickup coming back towards us. And he said, "What happened to you guys?" He says, "I waited at the turnoff. You guys never showed up." I said, "Ray, we're stuck." And he says, "Oh, I got a rope. We'll pull you out." I said, "Dude, it's not going to help." The engine came out of the car. And he's like, "What?" I said, yes. So I hop in his truck. We drive back down. He looks under the hood, and he puts his hands on his head. And it's like, what are you going to do? So that morning, he was showing me his cell phone. And I said, "Hey, you got your cell phone, right?" And he says, "Yeah." I says, "Do you have any, does it work here?" So he opens the phone up, and there's no signal where we are. And he says, Okay, tell you what, let's drive back down the road the way we came until we got signal. And I said, what do you want to do? I said, I can't afford to have anybody tow us. I want to call an auto parts store, which the nearest auto parts store from where we were was Indio. It was a couple hours drive, maybe, yeah. And see if they have motor mounts for a 1964 Ford Falcon. And if you could loan me money, on next payday, I'll just pay you back. So we tell Brian, we're going to go get parts for the car. And he's like, where are you going to get car parts? I said, we're going to drive to Indio and get car parts. So this is around 9 o'clock in the morning. And he's like, well, you okay? I said, look, we're going to be back. You're going to be fine. Now, he's like 17 or 18 years old. So we get in Ray's truck, and we take off down the road. And we're driving down the road. We make the turn, and we're heading back towards the 62, which goes to Parker, right? And I didn't even think of Parker. I just now remember that. But anyway, we're on the we're driving on the highway, and I'm holding Ray's phone. And all of a sudden, we get a whisper of a signal. So at that time, it cost you money to call information, and it was not cheap, several dollars. So I told, I'll pay for it, Ray. Just let me know what it costs. So I called information, and I got the phone number of a Napa in Indio, right? I call the Napa, and the guy tells me, I have a set of motor mounts for a 1964 Ford Falcon with a 6-cylinder. I said, dude, can you put a hold on him? We're on our way to get him. I'm stuck in the desert, and I need to put him in the car. So I give him my name. I give him Ray's phone number. They were $40. This is back in the 80s. Ray gets there. When we get there, we're driving through the desert going as fast as we humanly can. So it is 2.5 hours before we get to Indio. We go to the Napa, get the auto parts. Ray pays with his credit card. We take off and head back. I'm holding these things in my hands. And I'm thinking to myself, holy jumping juniper bugs, these things better fit. This is cool by now. Oh yeah. Nothing like it. Dead soldier. And my buddy Ray has since retired from the police force, and he lives in Florida with his wife and kids. Well, his kids got to be almost adults, because my kids are adults. I should ask him. We keep in contact occasionally. So anyhow, we're heading back up by Brian, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And this is the fall. So it's going to be dark about 4 or 4:30. Now, Ray has to go to work the next day. He's got a shift the next morning. So we get back to the car. And there's Brian, sprawled out in the sand. Is this thing still going? Yeah, sprawled out in the sand, lying next to the car. And we pull up, and he jumps up and looks at it, and he's like, oh my God, you're back. I thought you were never coming back. I thought you left me. I said, dude, I told you it was going to take hours. He is beside himself. Hey, calm down, dude. We're back. We're back. We're back. So he sits down. He you know, relax, bud, relax. We're back. We're back. So Ray and I get right to work. And we got to do this very carefully. So we had to use the bumper jack, or the bumper jack from the Ford, to lift the front up very carefully. And we used Ray's scissor jack out of the Toyota to carefully lift the engine. And he and Brian are under the hood holding this engine, trying to balance it. We finally get it up, right? I had to loosen the trans mount. Now, I never go in any place without a toolbox full of tools. And that's why. We loosen the trans mount. We get the thing up. I bolt in the new motor mounts, lower the scissor jack. We found an old piece of wood that we used to put it on the oil pan. Because just my luck, I'd be scissoring it up and blow a hole through the oil pan, right? That'd be the end of that. And lowered it back down, and all it was these two rubber mounts with a nut on each end. We tightened it all down, brand new motor mounts, retightened the transmission mount, which was cracked, but it wasn't broken. Started the car, and we're like, oh, thank you, God, the car started. Now it's getting dark. Ray pulls us back. I turn the car around, and he hooks his strap to us and pulls us all the way down to hard ground. We get to the top. I go through the gears. The trans is working. The car's not overheating. Nothing else is broken. And Ray looks at me and says, I'll let you know how much everything is, dude, but I gotta leave now because I gotta go home and get enough sleep because I got an early shift. And he leaves. Boom. And I tell Brian, I said, you better hope that this thing doesn't break down, because we didn't have cell phone in those days, and the police department encouraged police officers to get a cell phone. I think they actually helped pay for part of it, so he could be on call wherever he was, right? But anyway, so we drive all the way back down to the bunker where we camp. You know, we had only found the bunker a couple of years before this. So we're inside the bunker. We get our sleeping stuff in there. It's starting to get chilly outside. We start a fire in the stove, you know, the oil drum inside the bunker, right? And I take my canteen out of the front seat of the car and I go to drink water out of it, and it's empty. So in the back, I had 3 one-gallon jugs of water. And I said, dude, where's all the water? And Brian looks at me and goes, I drank it. You what? I drank all the water. I didn't think you were coming back. So your survival instinct at that point was to drink, after you thought you were abandoned in the desert, to drink all the water. Yes. So now here it is, like 6 o'clock at night. It's dark out. And our food is like, you know, Spam, you know. I had sea rations, you know, because at the time I was in the National Guard, and you could get all the sea rations you wanted, and that's what I'd eat in the desert with sea rats, which are light years better than an MRE, and don't anybody tell you that different, because I think MREs are crap. They're tomato heavy, tomato and pasta heavy. Now I understand that the pasta is a carb, and it's a lot of energy in carbs, right? And tomatoey foods can be preserved for longer because tomatoes have a high acid content. But if you're like me and eat too much tomato stuff and it gives you the Hershey squirts, well, there you have it. Anyway, so I look in the ice chest, and we had brought it was a big styrofoam one filled to halfway with ice. And in it was a 12-pack of Schaefer beer and ice. So you take we had cups left over from drive-through on the way there. So I took one of these paper cups, I filled it with ice, and I poured the beer in it. And I was so thirsty, and I drank that ice cold Schaefer, man. And that was like ambrosia from heaven. Mmm. And I'll never forget when that first foamy dollop of beer went down. That first ice flipping cold dollop of beer went down. It was like heaven, right? And I said, you better get your cup out of the car, buddy. Put ice and beer in it, because that's all there is you're going to get to drink till tomorrow. Well, we were going to stay out there a couple of days, but I didn't think just drinking beer and ice was a good thing. So the next morning we got up and took off down the road, heading home. Driving down the road, drunk driving. Well, we weren't drunk, but we were driving along drinking Schaefer and ice, and we finally get down to the 62. And you know, you had paper maps in those days, and paper maps didn't tell you jack. They just told you where you were. If you know how to orienteer, you know where you are, and you know where you're going, where you can get to. But all you're looking at is places on the map with names. It doesn't give you like 2 gas stations, a diner, a hotel. None of that was on there. So the nearest settlement. Hang on, I got an itch on my back. That got it. The nearest settlement to where we were was a place called Vidal Junction. Now, I'll try to show a picture of it around here. So we take off to Vidal Junction. Now, I knew from my travels through the desert when I was younger with my folks and stuff that there was a gas station at Vidal Junction of sorts. So we get to Vidal Junction, and the gas station is still there, right? And it was like a 1940s gas station. It still had the roundy pumps, right? This is when gasoline was only 69 cents a gallon. And yeah, it still had the roundy pumps. So we go inside, and here's these 2 guys sitting in beach chairs. And the guy says, you guys need a fill up? And I thought to myself, yeah. So I had like $30 and Brian had like $15. And we bought 4 gallons of water out of their fridge, out of their freezer thing there. And they were charging $1 a gallon. When you could go to like a regular supermarket and get it for 29 cents. When you're in the middle of no place and you have no water, $1 a gallon is cheap. Because Brian goes, man, that's more than the gasoline. Shut up. I didn't drink all the water. So we got in that car and rinsed out those cups and put ice in them. I swear to God, we each drank a gallon, driving back down the 162 to the 77 and down to the 10. I don't think we had any water left by the time we got home. We were just so grateful to have it. And our cigar went out because I've been talking. And and I'll tell you the truth, I had that Ford for like 2.5 more years, that old Ford Falcon, and it was all beat up. The interior was trashed. The paint was coming off. And I never had another lick of problem with it. I mean, if I had an opportunity to buy another like Ford Falcon in the 60s, the early 60s, I think I'd get it if it was in decent shape. Because you could fix it with a pair of pliers, a screwdriver, and a coat hanger. There's nothing to it. You know, change out the clutch in an afternoon. I sold it to a buddy of mine who had horse property out in Rubidoux, and they used it to for years after that. They'd hook they would use they had like this big rake thing that they would drive around their horse pasture and level it out, and that's all they used the car for. I think 10 years later they were still doing that with it. You know, as time goes by, you know, people change. You know, Brian ended up, I think, getting married and moving off somewhere else. And Ray, you know, as he moved up in the police department, became busier and busier. And you know, those things happen. You know, but he was one of those fine human beings, really fine human being. Of course, you know, being a policeman changes you. You know, my son-in-law is a police officer, a law enforcement, a Leo, and it's changed him. And everybody I know who became a police officer has changed. But you know, doesn't mean they're bad people. Because you know, when you're in that type of position, you're exposed to the worst of humanity sometimes. It's really the worst. Well, anyway, this was a long video, 32 minutes. I apologize for taking so long, but you know, I wanted to tell you the story. I mean, I've joked about it over the years. Like I'd say, "Oh man, ice and beer," but that's a story for a different that's the story for a different video. And here's that different video. Right now. Anyway, like and subscribe, leave a comment. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, guys. I appreciate each and every one of you patrol members out there. So until we have the next Mojave Patrol meeting, later, Mater.
Thanks for watching, you filthy animal.